All right, welcome to Two Cats Talking. I'm your host, Cat One. Co-host is Cat Two. So tell everybody, Cat Two, tell them hello.
What's up from Cat 2?
Dude. All right, so we've been having this long-term debate about crypto, politics, the financial system, and all of that. So my argument is that crypto virtual currencies, it's giving people an opportunity to make some money. Potentially some people will get hurt because, if your timing is wrong, if you're thinking that this opportunity is going to always be there, again, your timing could be such that you buy high and you sell low and you lose money. There's a bunch of scammers out there, fake projects, all types of things to get you to part with your money. However, I still see it as an opportunity. And so Cat 2, he has a different take on things. So I've been involved in crypto for, 2013 and had varying degrees of success. But I've also been, rug pulled, scam, lost money, all of that, right? And so I understand what the opportunity represents itself as, and I just view it as an opportunity. Whereas Cat 2, he has a different take on things, much dire. And so with that, I'll just say we're going to title this one, "The End is Coming." So Cat 2, I'll let you give your piece and we'll start the discussion.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good intro. I think with the exception, though, that I don't believe it's just necessarily confined to the idea of being scammed or rug pulled or any of those things. I think we all know that those are things that happen, and you can just kind of wave that off with a buyer beware type thing, right? Like it's up to the person to kind of make those decisions or whatever. So I don't have a problem with that, and I also know that it's an opportunity. I definitely accept that. I've made money in crypto myself. Actually, I haven't been scammed, like not yet, knock wood. So I'm net positive with regard to playing around with crypto. So I don't think it's about the short-term opportunity as much. I think both of us cats agree on that to some extent. I just think that it's more about where things are going versus where people may think things are going. And in the longer term, and when I say longer term, I don't necessarily mean 20 years. Or even 10 years, maybe not even 5 years. I just think that, everything we're hearing about, quote unquote, Web3, decentralization, all of these things, and the way they're being sold are not even close, actually, to the reality. And I think the reality is one that's far more dangerous, potentially, and potentially ominous and dystopic, or is it dystopian, whichever of those apply. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't want to start off with a long speech, so I'll stop here. But I know that what I've said so far does not get into the details. It's kind of abstract. So hopefully, as we continue to talk, we'll get there, and hopefully, I can convince Cat 1 to be in a full-out panic attack mode by the time we finish the talk. If so, my mission will have been accomplished.
This dude is funny. Okay, so with the comedy hour going. All right, so let's give a little bit of backdrop. So we were involved in the early web scene, say late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember distinctly we were working on a project, and specifically, I remember having this thought: why are multinational companies or multi-conglomerates, why are they putting so much time and focus to adding cameras, microphones, and technology into cell phones just so people can take cat pictures and do little silly things? And so you got to remember, this is when you're still on dial up for a lot of people, and got into I think IDNS or whatever that early broadband was. And so broadband was really reserved for techies and businesses. So it wasn't, in everyone's home. We're still on twisted pair, baud modem and all of that kind of stuff. But I remember just having that thought, why were they doing that, right? And what were they doing? I mean, because I couldn't see where we were going, but I remember distinctly that point. So you fast forward and you see, with the elections, we would advise everyone to watch The Great Hack and then The Social Dilemma. Those are two documentaries you can find on Netflix. And they get into we go, late 2018, 19, 2020. And you really see that now we have a whole generation that has grown up, on these APIs, on these devices, and they can't part with their cell phones. They're just, almost an extension of their body. But at the same time, people, their whole worldview and kind of their identity are attached to these devices. And I did not see that back when I had the earlier comment about why they were putting this stuff in these phones. And when I watched the Social Dilemma, there's a point in there where the guys in Silicon Valley, they were talking about they were doing these things, and there was a good bit of psychology behind it, and they knew that they were building a propaganda machine. And so now you see where things have gone. We can see that they were really building the new media to be brain control. And I didn't know that that's what they were building when I first asked that question. So I think that backdrop is important for this discussion, as we go on. So I'll just stop there, and Kat, too, if you got any follow-up to that.
No, actually, I think that's a really good point, man. And I think you made at least 10% of the argument that I'm trying to make. Because I think if you look back at, just like you said, no one saw that coming, and whether this was actually all constructed for the purpose of, building this propaganda machine is debatable, and it probably doesn't matter. That versus, people seeing it as an opportunity to turn these new communication tools into a propaganda machine. It's like maybe 6 in one, half in the other. Doesn't really matter if it was intentional from the ground up, but what's important is that it has happened. And if you, just like you said, and I think this is the key part, most of us probably did not see that coming. It's pretty safe to say. And even as we started to go down this path of kind of almost documenting our lives and spending so much time online, and then ultimately getting our information from these online sources, I think it still wasn't really in full view. You could obviously make the argument, but it's, the thing about seeing things early is that you're alarmist when nobody else sees them, right? You're just, you may be, just anti-technology, or, you're just an alarmist, Luddite, or whatever you want to call it. Is it Luddite, whatever. But in any case, now looking back, we see where it's brought us. And so I guess my argument is just mainly, let's not let that happen again, right? Let's not get caught sleeping again. And let's look at where we are and look at where people are trying to take us. And the funny part is, it's, I think, a lot clearer right now where things are heading. It's just a matter of whether you interpret it to be good or bad, or whether you see the danger in where we're heading, right? I think that's what it kind of comes down to. So we now have the benefit of knowing that we should be vigilant, right? Because of the experience we had. We can't claim we don't know anymore. We didn't see anything coming. We thought the world was great and nothing bad could happen. So we've got that, but we've also got the benefit of people telling us kind of where they'd like things to be. So I think what we all have to decide is whether that is a good place, and whether the people who are involved in pushing us there. And keep in mind, we don't see necessarily everybody, right? Like, everybody who's kind of behind this movement is not necessarily out here publicly telling us they're behind this kind of movement, right? So I think when you take all of that into consideration, what we can see and who we can see should be alarming enough. And what, and this is not conspiracy theory. Again, it's out in the open. And as we get into it, you can nod your head and everybody can see that this is what's happening. I think the only decision to be made is whether, bad things can happen, so, I'll turn it back over to you if you want to, kind of continue to walk us into this discussion further.
Yeah, I would say let's set up the argument, right? And this is kind of how we got here. Um, so what kind of crystallizes? Well, a couple things. So let's a little bit more backdrop, then we get into our argument. So probably we go back to 2006, 2008, somewhere around in there. I don't know where I remember first hearing the term fake news. But one thing that kind of a point that reminds me of that was I remember Charles Barkley did a special on TNT, and I think it was called Race in America. And there was a particular segment, I want to say it was episode 4, where he interviewed this right winger, and the guy talked about how there were basically a committee or people that were hired to create fake news, right? And so again, I don't know when everyone else can say that they first heard of the term, but I would say somewhere mid 2000s, maybe a little bit before or a little bit after. And I just never understood what this whole fake news thing was about. And I didn't know the end game. So Cat 2 and I, we were always have this conversation. And I would say from time to time, what is this end game on a fake news? It's like, so one narrative that we have in our conversation is we see what's happening, but we don't know what the end game is for why they're doing this thing, right? And so this was a conversation that we've had, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years. And now I think it's closer to 12. And now I see better of what it was. But I didn't see it at first. And so I'll just stop there. I'll let you chime in, then I'll pick back up.
Yeah, and I think I was probably jumping a little bit more ahead to the financial and the crypto and the, that piece of it that, we talked about, but I think I hear what you're saying, and, it's just kind of backing all the way up to like this whole idea of propaganda and fake news and all of that stuff that set the stage for pretty much everything now, including the crypto and all of those pieces. So, yeah, I mean, backing up to that, yeah, I mean, I think we kind of see now, it was really funny because it's kind of the frog boiling in the pot kind of thing where it's not even that, because you felt it happen and you were alarmed by it, right? Like you felt these things starting to happen when people started talking about fake news, and there's, and to be clear, like I think the whole point of that is to obliterate, the importance of truth, the ability to get to the truth, the source of truth. And once you kind of erase all of that stuff, you got, you turn everything into like a blank canvas that you can just start building your own truth or reality on top of. And like we talked about, I know I've said this a lot, is that, at a certain point, if what's true doesn't necessarily matter, and this is what these people understand, if you can get everybody to behave as if something is true, at that point, for all intents and purposes, it is true, right? Like, so, if you can, get everybody to believe, whatever, like the election was stolen. I don't even want to get political at this point, just anything, anything, and we know it's not true and everybody knows it's not true, but you get enough people to act as if it's true, to behave as if it's true, then now they're imposing that truth on us in such a way that we have to live according to that. So I'll go back to the election thing. People make laws based on that, based on the idea that there was a fraudulent election, and now we make laws that move things in the other direction, right? Like that is a way of, of making the world, society live according to this untruth as if it's true, right? And I won't even make a political statement as to whether I believe it or not. Whoever's listening, whatever they believe, the point is just that that's an example of how it doesn't even matter if it's true or not, right? And so, and I think that's kind of the place we've come to. And I think we didn't get here by accident, right? And there's been documentaries like you mentioned earlier that have talked about this, right? That in part, and then you layer on top of that the algorithms that reinforce these things, and then you layer on top of that kind of this manufactured social validation where people, there's the illusion that people believe it, which helps to kind of accelerate the idea that it's true, or that, we need to live according, as if it were true, right? So like, there's now likes, there's this, there's that, there's trolls, there's all of this stuff that's happening, where there's this impression that, that a society believes this thing. And that impression alone is enough to create the illusion that society believes this thing. And that illusion alone is enough to make people, subordinate to it, whether or not it's true, to have to live as if it were true. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. And it's very difficult now for people, even who have the truth, right, who have, a grip on what is true, to actually have society behave as if it's true. And we see it with the pandemic most recently. And everything, it's not an accident. Everything is now being laced with that. Everything is being made, and that's purposeful. Every single thing now, nothing is just, it is what it is. Like, think of the last thing, if you just carve things up into two political sides. Think of the last thing, simple or not so simple, right, that everybody just kind of agreed on. Everything now is an opportunity to refute the idea of truth. And that's where we are. And against that backdrop is how we're moving into this new Web3 world and this idea of decentralization.
Yeah. So let's move forward a bit. But yeah, I'll just say this and we'll move on. Yeah, the whole fake news thing came to a head because, again, we asked the question, what's the end game for fake news? And I never forget, I was in a drive-through at a restaurant. I was picking up some food, January 6th, and I had my phone on, and I saw what was happening. And at that point, it was immediately clear what part of the end game was for fake news. And to me, how I categorized it was this: enough of the truth was questioned. Therefore, you couldn't really decide what the truth was. So therefore, anything was then possible. And then if anything is possible, to your point, if you can get enough people to agree on that thing being true, then you can, what's the right word? You can put them into action if you can get them emotionally invested enough. And I think, the people were.
That's right.
And as a result of that, they did what they thought was the right thing in their mind.
Yeah, and that's a primary example. They got those people to act as if it were true. And there's no, we won't get into the evidence and all of that yet. Maybe we will later or not. But regardless, they got enough people to act as if it were true, to believe it. Now, what that means is the rest of us now have to contend with that. We have to contend with the laws that have come out of that and all the things that are changing as a result of that. And of course, the people who were at the Capitol that day, some of whom lost their lives, among the rioters and among the, police officers and the people, all of the people who were involved with that had to live with this lie. They had to live with this thing as if it were true.
Yeah, that's interesting because, again, as I said earlier, the title of this is The End Coming, right? And you see kind of how we've gotten here just by laying a bunch of the background from, the fake news to building a propaganda machine or behavioral machine. And now to the point where we'll go with the argument. So I guess maybe earlier this week, Cat2 had sent me a video, and it was pretty long. It was a YouTube video, and the title of it was The Problem with NFTs. So he said, take a look and listen to this. It's kind of long, took me a while to get through it. And so I started to watch it. And so I watched it, and the author, he laid out, a bunch of background about the technology around some of the systems that it was set out to replace, just going through, cryptocurrencies, what happened during the financial crisis. And he did a very good job of laying out his thesis for how a lot of this stuff is not what it seems. And so he talked about one point in the video where he said, this is really a war between the 1%ers and the 5%ers. The 1%ers, of wealth, that they're the current, I guess, masters of the system, and the ones that are in charge and the new tech 5%ers that they're trying to create a new game via Web3, cryptocurrencies, and the like, to be able to usurp that authority such that they can then usher in their own game plan and strategy. And so, Cat 2, he kind of talked about why this was dangerous, why this was very important, and that just like the January 6th event that he had been shouting from the rooftops about a year before, it culminated to that event, or maybe even longer, that I did not see coming. So if history repeats itself in this case, then we're headed to a much more dangerous situation. And, it can just mean a lot to us as individuals, not just from a national perspective in terms of Americans, but even, personally, that it can affect our day-to-day lives. So my argument was, I really didn't care that much, but he is, so that's a part of this argument in this episode, is to convince me otherwise. Because again, I started with earlier saying that I don't really care. I see crypto as an opportunity to make money, or just the opportunity. Now, if you're successful at it or not, that's a whole nother conversation. But the opportunity, whereas in this economic system that's set up right now, it's just so unfairly constructed in a lot of ways. And so unless you have a bunch of would you say factors in your favor, you can fall through the cracks, and things are it's just hard because inflation, the pandemic, wages, all of those things, have in, I think of the 5 biggies: healthcare, taxes, education, food, and housing. Those factors there, they've all increased significantly, and they some people make enough money to be able to take care of those things comfortably. Others are just barely getting by, and they're some people are struggling, and they're above the line, right? And so when you think about that in conjunction, my argument is, against that backdrop, we need another opportunity. If crypto is an opportunity, then I'm for it. But, so that's my argument. So Cat 2 will present his.
Yeah, my argument is, it comes along with a really high cost. And yeah, it's an opportunity to make money. If you just look at crypto as a baseline kind of blockchain, crypto, buy it and sell it, it's a lot less, it's a lot more innocuous. It's a lot less, doesn't seem as ominous or whatever, right? Okay, anybody can buy and sell, don't get scammed. You might lose your money, you might make money. It just seems really kind of benign and like, buyer beware, and, that's it. But that is only the foundation, that's kind of like the base layer that's needed to start to build all of these other things on top of it. And that's exactly what we see, is that, these layers that are being built on top of it are, we're moving into the NFT space. We're moving into this idea of tokenization, pretty much of everything from identity to pretty much everything can be bought or sold in this new world. And we're moving toward this metaverse where people are working to like move us into a space where we're spending a lot of our time invested in this kind of alternate, world or universe that's being created, and the economy kind of strapped to the economy that they're creating on top of that as well. And the thing about it is that it's specifically designed to sidestep a lot of what should be empowering to people, which is government, which is the regulatory regime, all of these things. Now, you can definitely make the argument, and we've made it many times, that, and we agree on this, is, the system is not working for people as it is. The system has been captured. It's been corrupted to some extent. Like, all of these things are true. But my whole point is that doesn't mean that anything that replaces it is default good, or even default better, or especially default better. And it can actually get worse. All right. And so the key is not to throw this whole thing out and replace it with something else that, that's essentially operated by people that are beholden to no one. I don't know why we think that would be better. The key is to fix the system we have that continues to give people, or the answer is to fix the system that we have that is designed to give people a voice and get people back in control of that system and enable those voices. Because if you remove government, then what they've done a great job of doing is just beating down this idea of government. Government is bad, government is evil, government is bad, especially the federal government. Government is bad, government is evil. So now people, and then we're so demoralized, whether you're on the left or right, and that's really where things fall down in this country, unfortunately. You could say I'm just talking in these binary terms, but that's just the reality. I wish it wasn't. I wish there were viable third parties, all that stuff, but that doesn't exist. So when you break it down, it really comes down to no matter who you are, you're just dissatisfied. You know what I mean? If you're on the right, you're dissatisfied with this set of things. You think your freedom's being threatened. You think, there's a whole list of things. If you're on the left, there's a whole list of things that you're dissatisfied with. So nobody's actually kind of really fully invested in standing up for the country as it is and kind of rebuilding it as it's supposed to be, right? As it's meant to be. And it's kind of against that backdrop that they're continuing to beat down this idea and demoralize us all on the idea of our country being fixable. And instead, let's abandon it. Let's abandon government. Let's throw government out because it's the problem. Well, government is it should be of, by, and for us. And if we give up that pretense, then what hope will we even have? There's no hope of us being able to, affect our outcomes or self-govern or be, invested and empowered in determining our future, right? So that's one kind of dangerous side, kind of a almost side chain swipe at the whole thing that's kind of, helping to drive some of this narrative. And so, I think you kind of, because we've all seen the dissatisfaction with the current banking system and all of these things, it's designed in certain ways. We call it the matrix and all of those things. I think there's a rush to embrace whatever comes. And this is where we start to diverge because we agree on all of the problems, but this as a solution is where we disagree, especially as we start to look forward into what they are trying to create, which is, and let me just say it because I feel like I keep talking too abstractly and just throwing it back over to you to, so to get down a little bit further into it, it's essentially a world, kind of alongside of the existing world, right? What they're doing is they're creating this world and trying to get people to divest in the current reality and invest more and more in this new reality that they're creating, wherein, they call it decentralization, which is the biggest joke of all. That's the biggest rug pull because you've just got, a relative handful of people who are really pushing for this and who are organizing the blockchains. I mean, it doesn't matter that the data lives on 100 different computers or whatever, 100 different nodes or servers or whatever, or 1,000 or whatever, if they are all effectively owned and controlled by a central organization, right? Like a consortium or whatever you want to call it. So, it's this joke of decentralization as if this is going to all of a sudden, remove the disenfranchisement of the masses or whatever, because now it's called decentralized. So we're all equally bought into this thing. Well, we already see, look at gas fees. Who's getting the gas fees? Who's getting Ethereum gas fees, right? I mean, we already see that it's just effectively the creation of our current economy with new masters and new owners that is not subject to regulation. Code is law or whatever it is, that is, not transparent, which is the most, maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say what's the most ironic, but not transparent, right? Like you don't really know who's buying. The whole thing was supposed to be anonymity is good and blah, blah, blah. But really all it does is provide a layer of opaqueness where you can't see who's doing what behind the scenes. So you get wash trading, you get all of these things that happen, you get pump and dumps, you get all of these things that happen. And, somebody's losing and somebody's winning. So long story short, I just wanted to get a little bit more down into the weeds of what's being created. But the point is that there would be no governance, that it would be, completely owned and operated by effectively a handful of cartels, essentially. And it would create this new world where we would all be, kind of invested in that economy and even to some extent dependent on it, but have zero to no even opportunity to self-govern, right?
Okay. So given that, again, where I look at cryptocurrencies, say the first order, and then NFTs, if you will, the second order, because they're layered on top of cryptocurrencies, right? And I'm saying, hey, just look at this as an opportunity for profit, or for potential profit. Let me say it that way. There's no guarantee, but you see it being creating the basis of something much worse. So let's get into what that is, and I want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned. You're talking about the current system we know is bad, but why do you think that this is the foundation of a worse system, but is being touted as a better system, and why are we potentially in danger?
Well, I mean, one sec. Little background noise here. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, there are a number of things. I think, one, and right off the bat, is the way it's being presented is clearly not what it is right out of the gate. So that gives you some indication of what the intentions are, right? It gives you some indication that the intentions are not transparent. Let's just put it that way. So that's one piece of it. Two, it's the people who are lining up behind it, right? And, I won't name specific names at this point, but there are a host of people that are lining up behind it that have a very specifically anti-government kind of angle. Three, I think, there's kind of this libertarian, and you don't hear as much talk, although the spirit of so-called libertarianism runs through it to some extent. But if you really look at it, there's a leaning towards some fascist tendencies, let's say that actually that are the actual truth, just in terms of kind of a corporate type regime with creating an environment with really strict laws, strict codes of behavior, and all of these kinds of things. And these are then just interlaced with this economy, which at some point people could actually become dependent on and kind of subject to. And people say code is law, but who controls that code? Whose code is it? And who's running that code? And who benefits from that code? They make it sound as if, again, this is part of the representation and then, of this thing. And then, understanding the reality of what this thing is and the disparity between those two things, like being presented as something good for all of us, but understanding that it is extraordinarily subject to corruption, right? And then wondering what are going to be the controlling, the regulatory or the controlling kind of parameters that prevent that corruption from happening, when we know what human nature is from the start. And when we know that some of the people who are lining up behind this are extraordinarily powerful to begin with, they are currently extraordinarily powerful and would love to not have to be hauled before Congress, or would love to not have to answer to anyone, and have stated as such openly, and have billions of dollars to put behind these efforts to create the illusion and fabricate the illusion of social validation and credibility and all of these things. So anyway, so going back, I think it is pretty much the stated purpose of all of this to undermine our government, our form of government, and that is democracy. With all of its failings currently, that is our form of government. So any effort to undermine that and replace it with anything else, especially something that is so perfectly an authoritarian tool, complete control over this alternate reality to a certain extent, to which we could all become beholden economically and otherwise, socially and otherwise, is very, very, it should be very scary to everyone. So we're supplanting our democracy with essentially an authoritarian form of, we call it, virtual governance, right? Over which we have very little say and control.
Okay, so I'm back up to something that you mentioned before. So I'll go back to the 2008 piece, where we know that there were a bunch of bad actors, and the blame goes around. From the homeowners that were buying more house than that they could afford, to the fraudulent predatory lenders that were allowing people that didn't have proper credit to buy more house than they could afford for speculation or otherwise, to the rating agencies that were rubber stamping these mortgage-backed securities, to the I guess unaware pension funds and sovereign wealth funds that were buying these, triple A rated bonds, to the, I don't know if I said the loan originators that were, making huge fees because they know that every loan that they originated, that they were going to get bought and wrapped into a securitization tranche and sold. So again, there was enough blame to go around. However, nobody went to jail. Very few people went to jail behind the crisis. However, many average Americans, lost their jobs, lost their homes, and their life was turned upside down. And if they, and even if that wasn't the case, some had to liquidate, a substantial amount of wealth just to make it through those lean times, only to have then a 12, 13-year run to where if you were able to sustain that and stay in the market, you would have profited handsomely. So, in creating this, so nothing happened with this first system. I can see why people are frustrated and mad and open to the idea of cryptocurrencies or to something else. Cryptocurrencies just happen to be the thing now, right? But to something else that offers opportunity where it doesn't seem to have existed before.
Yeah, and I totally get the impulse. That's just purely rational thinking, right? This isn't working for me. I need to change it. You know what I mean? And I think that impulse is like spot on. It's just what do we do with it and where do we go with it? And I think what that does also, other people recognize that is a rational response and they leverage that, right? Like they know where people are. They know their frustration. So this is a perfect time to introduce something that, seems like an opportunity for them, but that in a much, much larger way is an opportunity for a relative few people who may have a completely separate agenda, and then, once people are so bought into this, you see capital moving more into crypto assets and that kind of thing. Once people are more fully bought into this, it's going to be really hard to walk back, and I think what people don't recognize now is as much as the current system has been working for them, we rely on the dollar right now. Right. And, we have so much, right now is denominated in dollars and really, frankly, our ability, and you can say we shouldn't need to do this and we should strive to get to a place where we don't need to do this. But right now we print dollars because, it has saved us, now that's not the solution. We need to go back and fix the things so that things like 2008 don't happen. And we need to fix the system. We need to get, there's so much that needs to happen to make that happen. Right. But to this point, it has saved us essentially, that the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And so I think people who are just, dogpiling on the dollar, and to be honest, I don't know how many people truly are of U.S. origin are truly dogpiling on the dollar, at least not initially. Now, once people have kind of created the illusion that, we're kind of socially validated that that's the thing to do, then people start jumping on, they follow, and, it starts to become a reality, like we kind of talked about at the top of the call. But I think they don't know where that's going to take them. They think it's good for us to just, let's get out of the dollar. It's inflated, blah, blah, whatever. Let's all move to first it was gold, but now it's crypto. And it's like, yeah, yeah, but that's not necessarily going to work out better for you. Right. And in fact, there's a specific downside to Americans who have dollars wanting to and have assets denominated in dollars, wanting to destroy the dollar. Right. So, but then who benefits from that? And that's the other piece of this is, not everybody on the world stage is a friend of America, right? We have adversaries. So you can see the opportunities for them to push these narratives that undermine our status in the world. And, you can make arguments about what that status should be, what that posture should be in terms of our, I don't even really want to go down that path so much. I know people will think it, but the bottom line is where things are now or where they are, and just pulling the rug out from under our current system, including our currency, including our democratic way of life, flawed as it is right now, and inserting something else like this where we have no control is dangerous.
So good point. I want to pick up on two pieces there. So you talked about the enemies. So in one instance where we go back to the new architects of this crypto Web3 metaverse world. These are local, well, I won't say local, these are our US based billionaires in charge of, tech companies, and they're trying to usher this new, I don't know what you would call it. Let's just call it metaverse
that seems to be the word.
Yeah. So they want to usher in this new metaverse, right? To include all the things that we just talked about. And so they're on their path to, and so we would say the end goal just money and power.
Absolutely.
For those guys. Okay, absolutely. All right,
one sec here, but
and so you're fine. And so the other piece, I'll go on. So while you have that vector going in that way, and you can call them an enemy, and I think that's the way that you're describing them in terms of your argument. The second enemy is, like you say, is the nation states around the world that want to undermine the U.S. world's standing and leadership, and that they would like to see the U.S. fall in its prominence as a world leader. And if they can ride on the coattails of what the domestic, tech powers that are ushering this metaverse, they'll take advantage and do so. But they're at they're operating for a bigger game, a bigger scope, winner take all, where they even, affect the lives and the well-being of the domestic Web3 guys that are just trying to, gain the money and power.
I mean, it's to some extent. Yeah. I mean, in some of this you could say is not just, they're not just riding the coattails, but they are or have instigated some of this. I mean, I still think it's kind of ridiculous, the idea that you got, some super secret person who devised this technology, and then suddenly all this money starts rushing into it, and it becomes, validated so quickly, and people start throwing billions, and now we've got multi-trillion-dollar market cap or whatever in the crypto space. I mean, I think there's a little bit of naivete to that, just some random well-meaning anonymous guy, put this together, and there was nothing behind it that, even if that was initially the case. I mean, the idea that there was nothing behind it that a foreign actor might not have been taking advantage of, who might have architected this to begin with. So I guess at this point, it probably doesn't matter very much who specifically started it, as much as it matters that, we see opportunities for people to leverage it, and you can be pretty sure that they have, for their own good. And I think sometimes I think money and power for the domestic side of this, and the other part of this is there's also the possibility of these kind of forces not just necessarily being competing forces or tangential forces, but coordinated and cooperating forces, right? There's nothing to preclude the idea that they may even be working together towards this, because they have a common goal, right? So, but getting away from that, because that gets into conjecture, and I don't have any evidence for that. And, a lot of this conversation is about where things could very well go and appear to be going, just kind of based on maybe circumstantial evidence or whatever you want to say. So I don't want to start bringing in things as if they're facts. It's just kind of talking about what's possibly happening or what's possibly happened. But I guess more to the point is kind of where things look to be now and where they look to be going. And I think that it's almost comforting to think that all of these people are after is money and power, because we're kind of accustomed to that, and they already have money and power. So you're almost like, okay, well, what's so bad about that? There always will be powerful people and these kinds of things. But I think the key thing here is that it's not just money and power within the current system. It's actually a desire to supplant the current system with one where they have ultimate money and power, and really power they don't need any more money. It's power, right? And you say, for me, for a person who's not necessarily wired that way, and that includes myself, like I want a certain amount of power in terms of autonomy and agency with myself and what's immediately around me. And I would love to have some positive effect on the world. I would love to have some positive effect. And so it's hard for people like me, and I think a lot of people, to understand like why people seek power or what it is about power for the sake of power. But then if you just observe objectively, you can see that people are just after kind of a certain dominance, like to dominate their space, their world, their people, whatever it is, their society, their culture, this, space, whatever it is, that there are these certain personalities, we know all through history, who have just wanted power, and really for the sake of power. And in any case, you're seeing that now. And I don't trust that. Neither do I think anybody else should trust that, to give ultimate power over to a select group of individuals, one or, relative handful of individuals, and hope that everything works out. Hope that the world they create for us to live in is one that we will enjoy. That is authoritarianism, and that is possibly the path to some very bad things.
So given that, give me your a bad case scenario and then a worst case scenario if this comes to fruition.
Wow. I mean, that could possibly get into feeling a little like paranoia or like alarmism. But, it's funny. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I mean, everything seems alarmist until it happens, right? And then, like with 1/6, right? Like January 6th, it seems alarmist to be worried about things until something like January 6th happens. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what you're talking about, right? So, I mean, I don't know if it's useful to get to a worst case in terms of like an end result, like genocide, or millions of people being, killed because they don't conform, or, some of these kind of very specific, bad case, worst case scenarios that we've seen play out through history, right? Like you could see that replicating. I don't know that we even need to use our imagination to that extent to say that we could get to a starting point that could lead to any number of those kinds of things. That this could be the catapult to a foundation, a new foundation where any number of these things become possible, and where we as a society have given up the power and control needed to stop these things from happening, And I think the other thing is that, to the extent, and this is a hard sell right now because people, again, are so, skeptical or cynical about democracy, because right now it is broken. Right, it has been assaulted continuously for any number of years, and so it's hard to sell people an idea almost of democracy. But democracy and freedom do go hand in hand, and you see people now leaning towards authoritarianism because they believe it's the path to freedom. And we've seen that in any number of instances through the pandemic and through all of these other things, where people will go to a person who has almost dictatorial or authoritarian type tendencies, anti-democratic tendencies, because they somehow believe that person will keep them free from the tyranny of government, which is the democratic force in all of these things that actually gives power to people. And I think what I'm saying overall is that the world we're headed towards really quickly here, and the people are pushing us towards in this Web3 decentralized space, not everyone, but some key players who have a lot of power, they're pushing us to a place where any number of things become possible because we will have given up our autonomy, our agency, our ability to affect our outcomes. So again, I don't know if I want to get into like, this could be genocide. I mean, I think the loss of freedoms, of course, in democracy, a kind of an overall disempowering of the common person, and the assignment of opportunity being the purview of a select group of people, the assignment of wealth and all of these things being the purview of a select group of people, and us all living according to the whims of a handful of people who essentially rule the world for all intents and purposes. Even if governments are still standing and nation states are still standing, they just become almost ceremonial, like the monarchy in England or something, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because to hear you kind of go through that, and I guess that was the whole, one of the purposes here for us to present both kind of arguments, and I can see a bit better in terms, or even imagine, right? Because like you say, we can't necessarily say what it's going to look like, but using a bit of imagination, some history, and then just knowing, the hearts of men, that it can get bad, right? And I think the thing that we do have the recent history of January 6th to let us know that, yeah, you could be sounding an alarm now, which you are. And we can have another event that's worse than that, in that it affects more people than that. And I think, and I'll just end it with this. I think that what we're seeing that's happening in a bunch of state capitals around the country is that second phase where the voter laws and some of that is just part of this larger narrative to restrict voter rights. And if you restrict the voting rights of the people, now you're taking more of the government away from the people, and therefore giving more control to this authoritarian type government. You're leaning more toward that direction. So it's already in play. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out. So I could say that you've been somewhat successful in getting me to see that is bigger than just money and bigger than opportunity. But I also maintain that, and maybe this will be a future episode to talk about what are some replacement systems that we should really work to put in place to kind of right some of these wrongs with this current economic distribution of wealth, where it's fair to the average person. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a good stopping point. I mean, I'll just add to that those things could actually involve some of the technologies that are, and this is the irony. These things could actually involve some of the technologies that are being touted right now. It's just, some of the solutions that is. It's just a matter of, who is actually implementing them, who is participating and benefiting from them, what purpose are they being implemented for? On their own, these are all just technologies, right? And most technologies, some technologies probably just inherently evil, but most technologies are really neither good or bad. It's more how you use them, right? And so some of these very same tools could be the answer to some of the questions about, fixing a system. And that, by the way, is also why it is so tempting and so easy to move people into this world, because you can see possibilities with this technology. It's just, a matter of how they're deployed. So some of the answers may be right here in front of us, ironically enough. But I think we have to be cautious in choosing the paths that we choose.
Well, good. I appreciate that, Cat, too. So that concludes our debate. We'll be interested to hear how the listening audience, how they side with his argument, my argument. I think he has won me over a bit, but really want to see what your feedback is. If you like this format, and just let us know. What do you think about it? But that being said, two cats talk and sign it off.
All right.
Don't forget, we're here to make you think, and you can't say that you have not been warned. Two cats talking. Holla.